There are so many brilliant horror films out there that I think are amazing. Yet one film from 1984 has remained my favourite since I was 12 years old. This is a film that I can watch over and over again without ever getting tired. On average, I'd say I watch this film at least 3 times a year. And when I was doing my dissertation, which this film formed the basis of, I must have watched it 30 times in quick succession, and I still never got bored of it. So what is this amazing film that has held my imagination for so long? Well, let's start the video and find out. Hello, and welcome to Everything Fear's The Shed of Dread. I'm Kit Tinsley, the host of the Everything Fear podcast. Everything Fear is dedicated to all things horror, so if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, I'll put a link in the description below. With these videos, what we're aiming to do is movie reviews, analysis, and top 10 lists, things like that. If you like this video, if you could please give us a like, subscribe, and maybe tap that bell icon to get notified of whenever we upload new content, then that'd be great. So, why is A Nightmare on Elm Street my favourite horror movie of all time? My relationship with this film began way back when I was about 8 years old, and I saw the VHS copy in our local video rental store for the first time. The cover for the UK VHS copy of the film came from the cinema quad poster done by the amazing artist Graham Humphreys, who I have interviewed before on the podcast. The imagery captivated me, and I looked at the back and I read the blurb and I looked at the images, the stills on the back of the box, and of course my parents wouldn't let me rent the film when I was 8 years old, but I was already obsessed. I made up my own version of the story in my head, just from the imagery I'd seen and the synopsis on the back of the box. Then at 10 years old, a friend of mine finally got a copy of the film for us to watch. And one rainy afternoon, we all sat down in his living room to watch this film. I lasted all of about 20 minutes before I was too terrified to carry on. Yet my obsession remained. We used to make Freddy Krueger gloves out of real gloves with bits of cut-up yogurt pot, painted silver and bronze to look like Freddy's glove. I remember buying the novelisation of the first 3 movies, thinking that maybe I could get to learn the full story without having to endure the terror of watching the films, and it wouldn't scare me as much. But after about 3 sleepless nights, my mother actually threw away my copy of the book, bless her. A few years later, I'd moved towns. I was at secondary school, and me and my new best friend decided to watch A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, and we absolutely loved it. From there we went on to Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, and finally I faced my fear and we went back and watched the original Nightmare on Elm Street. This time I absolutely loved it. The film was so much scarier and darker than the other 2 entries in the series that we'd started with. So what is it about this film that holds my and so many other people's imagination after all these years? Let's start with its creator. Wes Craven was a highly educated man, and the central idea of the film that he came up with is terrifying. Something that invades your dreams and kills you in your sleep. That's a scary concept. I mean, everyone has to sleep. It's a physiological necessity, but now you're not safe when you're asleep. It resonates with some primal part of our brain. It wakes up dormant fears that our ancestors must have had when they went to sleep at night, not knowing if they were going to be attacked in the night. But add to that central idea the construction of the character of Freddy Krueger himself. The fact that he is some sort of supernatural child killer links him to the fairy tale villains of our personal and cultural childhoods. in a very real way. Child killers, those who destroy innocence, are the worst kind of monsters in our real world. So this amplified supernatural version is truly, truly frightening. Then we have his weapon of choice, his iconic glove. There's something amazingly powerful about this weapon. It becomes a part of him, an extension of his evil, and a representation of the animal that our ancestors feared when they slept. His hat and glove, combined with Robert Englund's amazing performance, creates an instantly recognisable and iconic silhouette. Even his red and green sweater has a purpose. These two colours are the hardest for the human brain to process when they're put next to each other. They make the brain feel uncomfortable. They're designed to create unease in the mind. Robert Englund was not the original choice for the role. English actor David Warner was originally cast in the role of Freddy Krueger and went as far as having makeup and costume tests done. However, scheduling conflicts meant that Warner couldn't take the role. Though it's now impossible to imagine anyone other than Robert Englund playing the part, I would have loved to have seen an alternate universe version of the film where Warner played Freddy Krueger, because Warner is an amazing actor, and his roles in The Omen, Straw Dogs, and as the villain in Time Bandits show he certainly had the horror credentials for the part. In the end, the part did go to Robert Englund, and he brought something amazing to the character. A swagger, a presence, an energy. He was full of menace, and yet he was gleeful. He really enjoyed what he was doing. The film itself is full of groundbreaking sequences, like the scene of Tina's death, where they made a rotating room so that it would look like Tina was being dragged up and around the ceiling. Now, if you compare that sequence to the equivalent scene in 2010's lackluster remake, Tina's death is so much more visceral, real, and unsettling than the remake's version. The film also has sequences that verge on surrealism. For example, Johnny Depp's death scene. His character of Glenn is pulled into a hole in his own bed, and after he disappears, a geyser of blood erupts from the bed. I mean, the human body only contains about 8 or 9 pints of blood, yet there must have been gallons spewing out of that hole in the bed. The film wrestles with Freudian ideas throughout its entire runtime, from the nature of dreams and the meaning of dreams to sexual awakening and fear. Many slasher films are seen as reactionary because the mass killer is killing teens for some sort of transgression, be it smoking, drinking, or premarital sex. But it's seen as a very sort of trying to control transgressive behaviour. And the same, in some ways, could be said for A Nightmare on Elm Street. But I think Craven was making his film a direct criticism of his own generation's ability as parents. His generation are the children of the revolution. They had liberation, and it somehow made them inept as parents. In this way, Freddy could be seen as the ghost of 1940s and 1950s patriarchal family discipline, coming back to punish its grandchildren's generation for the transgressions of their parents. Even Freddy's hat is a very 1940s, 1950s sort of accessory to accentuate this point. But Craven was brought up in that era and was very open about the fact that his upbringing and the discipline that he received wasn't the best. And I think that what he's trying to say with A Nightmare on Elm Street is that there needs to be some sort of middle ground between the overly strict authoritarian nature of his parents' generation and the lackluster efforts of his own. The depth of this movie is quite often overlooked due to what a great, fun, scary movie it is. But if you peel away the layers, however, there are a lot of big ideas being explored here. This depth was, of course, lost in a lot of the later sequels, barring perhaps Part 2 with its gay undercurrent, and until Wes Craven himself returned to the series with New Nightmare in 1994. So, in conclusion, A Nightmare on Elm Street is my favourite horror movie of all time because it is a genuinely original and scary horror movie, with a monster that is perfectly constructed to be terrifying and iconic. The film is fun, but has a lot of big things going on under the surface. Robert Englund brought the character of Freddy Krueger to life in an incredible way, but mostly it's due to the often underrated intellectual genius of its creator. Wes Craven was a genius, and he is sadly missed in the horror community. If you agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments. Tell me what your favourite horror movie of all time is and why. If you've enjoyed this video, then please give us a like, subscribe, and tap that bell icon to be notified of future content. So, thank you for watching, and until next time, stay scared.